For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
Hey, we're going to take a little break here and talk about interstate batteries. Now, if you're like me, enjoying the great outdoors, you need gear that is as reliable as it gets. That's why I power my adventures with interstate batteries. I use interstate batteries in my boats. I use interstate batteries in my camper. Great for your truck, too. From Alaska to Montana, they're outrageously dependable. Battery is essential. With over 150,000 dealer locations, finding one is easy. For all your vehicles, land or sea, choose Interstate. Head to interstatebatteries.com and find your power today.
Hey, I just sat down with the owners and operators of Maui Nui Venison. They're on a mission to balance axis deer populations on Maui while giving back to the community and run a totally sustainable operation. For folks like me who want to get your own meat but aren't always successful, you can become a snack subscriber, get some axis deer sticks sent right to your door. Visit MauiNuiVenison.com. That's MAUINUI venison.com and use promo code CAL for 20% off your first order.
From Meat Eater's World News Headquarters in Bozeman, Montana, this is Cal's Week in Review with Ryan Cal Callahan. Now, here's Cal.
Hey, what's happening, friends and neighbors? This week's special drop, Cal's Week in Review, our weekly insertion of extra conservation knowledge. We have a very special guest, someone you may know, Stephen Rinella. Steve is not here in his official capacity as like the man at the helm of Meat Eater, but in his capacity as a Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership board member, and at risk of talking about a topic that may not seem like a real intriguing area of purview, I guess. I don't know. Inquiry. There you go.
No.
This is some people.
There might not be dudes at home dying to know about what boards, what nonprofit boards are all about.
Yeah, but folks always want to know about how they can be involved in conservation groups, and we get a ton of that at the Ask Cal email. So I thought it'd be good just to do a quick hitter here with old Steve about why the heck a guy who's as busy as he is is on the board of a conservation group, which is an unpaid position. You're volunteer. Why are you doing it?
I'm doing it because, man, it's a big conversation. I'm doing it largely because I was asked, I was invited to do it. I have a ton to say about being on it, but I didn't pursue it. Now, recently I did, I was recently at a fundraiser event for a different conservation organization, and I sort of dropped a hint that in the future that would be of interest to me, you know. But with the TRCP, or Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, I didn't realize, but maybe I was cultivated as a board member. Like, I was invited into certain discussions and did some fundraiser stuff, and eventually got the invitation to do it. And without really knowing what it meant to be a board member, I became a board member. And I am, there are a lot of different kinds of board members. I see that there's like different roles at board. There's ways to be a valuable board member. And I feel like I have a fairly, I make a fairly narrow contribution to the board at TRCP.
And in my experience, you're referencing there's board members who are very well connected with people who are in a position to make financial contributions to a nonprofit. There's board members who are well-connected, well-studied, and can help inform and guide the CEO in policy or marketing decisions for the organization. There's board members who have all of those skills, or their previous jobs gave them an added layer of insight into areas that your nonprofit that you're exploring works on.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So I'm not sure the latest count. At TRCP, there might be about, I'm not sure the latest count, around 24 board members. So with TRCP, let's think about that partnership thing for a minute. So just to help people get up to speed on what TRCP does. I'll start by what they don't do, okay? You have there's a lot of conservation organizations that do a lot of habitat work. They do land transfers. They're very involved on the ground, doing on-the-ground conservation work, okay? RMEF, Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation, like they're doing on-the-ground habitat work, among many other things, okay? Helping out federal agencies, helping out state agencies, like doing, down to the business of like removing old fencing or
running a chainsaw, setting things on fire.
Yep, like real on the ground stuff. TRCP's focus is federal policy. So as much as everybody loves to say like that, how everybody loves to hate lobbyists, you don't really. There are lobbyists that work against you, and there's lobbyists that work for you. And TRCP is on the ground in D.C., influencing, guiding federal policy for the benefit of hunters and anglers. So we know that under the Biden administration, there's a lot of spending on infrastructure. Okay, so they're going to have this big pot of money they're going to spend on infrastructure. That's already happening. No one's going to stop that. What can be done out of that infrastructure spending when they go to spend that infrastructure money? How can that be guided to be beneficial to wildlife? Okay, how can habitat and wildlife benefit from infrastructure spending and maybe overpasses on wildlife migration corridors? All right. Another area of federal policy, we have a big thing called the Farm Bill. Huge piece of legislation that impacts private land conservation all over the place.
Many people call it the single largest piece of legislation that impacts conservation.
Yep.
It's the biggest conservation thing that we have in our pocket.
Yeah, it's like that at TRCP. Conversations about the Farm Bill never go away. How can we influence the crafting of the Farm Bill to benefit wildlife, to benefit hunters and anglers? So that's the kind of stuff they work on. Let me give one more example. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill, okay? When all that money came in for cleanup, how can that money be best spent to rehabilitate fisheries? In that case, money can go in crazy directions, right? Like people can find all this like tangential stuff for that money. Like, how do we keep that money on task for fisheries? So those would be areas that the TRCP plays in. The partnership is that on certain issues, they represent a wide array of conservation organizations. So of those 24 board members, Becky Humphreys, who is running National Wild Turkey Federation, was a board member. She currently is Becky Humphreys is currently the interim CEO and president of TRCP, but she at a time ran NWTF and held a board seat at TRCP. So there's a type of board member there, right? The CEO, I don't know what title they use at Pheasants Forever. Was it CEO?
Yeah.
President, CEO, whatever.
Yep.
Howard Vincent very successfully ran Pheasants Forever. At the same time, he held a board seat at TRCP because they would collaborate together. So that's like a type of board member. At a time, they might have board members who are people from the sporting goods world. Okay, so there was a time when there was a brief period when the CEO of REI was a board member at TRCP. Okay, so that's another type. So the sporting goods world plays into the conservation space. You have that. You'll have other donors that there are other board members who are just great financial assets. And I don't want to diminish their work, but TRCP has a board member, for instance, of she represents a family endowment that invests very heavily in wildlife conservation. She was a board member at TRCP. There are also board members that have great fiscal chops, right? Great financial chops.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Because boards are typically comprised, and there can be extra positions, but you have like an officers group of a board chair, a vice chair, secretary, and a treasurer.
Yep, I think they call it the executive leadership committee or something. And those board members are really good at you're running a business, right? There's banking involved and all kinds of fiscal stuff. And so they bring all this expertise. And those are the ones on board calls, you're hearing a lot from them about just the management of it, right? I feel that my role as a board member is fundraising and awareness raising. And this is not going to come as news to anyone at TRCP, but I'm never going to be more than that. That's what that's what I am, and that's what I do, and that's what I have room for, and so that's where I try to contribute.
And within your however you guys do your calls, your monthly calls or a couple whatever your schedule is, though, I imagine there's room for discussion on how TRCP is going to weigh in on certain issues that I can't imagine you abstain from.
Okay, I'll say, I'll clarify that. I get interested in messaging, but all in all, I'm probably not. Well, I'm not. I have a lot of conflicts that keep me from being involved in a lot of the day-to-day stuff. Yep. I voice opinions about things. I try to help with messaging and priorities, but for the most part, I keep up to speed on what the organization does. I'm supportive of what the organization does, and I've never gone in and had any kind of a hissy fit about anything.
On why we're talking about this or how we're talking about this.
I don't feel that to be my role. I could picture later in life I might have more room for that, but I don't want to oversell. I don't want to in any way oversell how I'm involved with it. You know what I mean?
Yep. But then one thing that I think people may find interesting, right, is right now, TRCP is in a transition period. Had a long time CEO at the helm of TRCP for 15 years.
Yeah.
He's stepped down. You're in this interim CEO period, meaning that you have a temporary CEO. There's a search going on, trying to find that new leader for the org.
I've tried to be involved in that.
And that's part of the duties of a board. So the board can casually be referred to as the boss of the CEO.
I don't think, maybe people, but that might not be a thing that's well understood is, that's an interesting dynamic.
It is.
Because they're governed by a president CEO who is mostly presenting to the board of directors. They're mostly at the helm, presenting about what they're doing, presenting about priorities, right? And looking for some guidance, but they're like the boss of the room. But they're not.
Right.
They serve at the pleasure of a board. Right? And so it does create you can't become when someone runs a nonprofit conservation org that's set up with this structure, they're not a dictator, right?
Right. And oftentimes, we've covered this a bunch, but I'm on the board, just became the chair of the board for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We just went through a very the exact same thing. We had our longtime CEO step down. We went through a search. We interviewed a bunch of candidates, and we have a brand new CEO, Patrick Berry, and it's really interesting. This brand new person of the organization is running the organization, but weekly and for the executive committee and monthly, soon to be every other month, kind of presents the organization, and in certain aspects kind of asks for permission to say, like, okay, this is where we want to go, this is what we want to do. How's that sound to everybody? Right? And it's like, okay, have you considered this? That's typically the way the board informs. That's interesting. I like where you're headed, but have you considered going this path, or have you considered asking this partner organization for help? Hopefully that's not too vague for everybody, but that's kind of how we're not there to manage, but it's a oversight committee.
Yeah, I think that in business too, like if you're going to put someone forward to do a job, you can't hamstring them with second guessing. You know what I mean? Like you're there to do a thing. Like if you were going to bring in a really a very effective person to lead an organization, and they feel like they're constantly in permission asking mode,
you could see how they wouldn't be in ass kicking mode.
Yeah, it's hard to get effective. So I think that's. I guess that's one of the areas that I don't do a lot of is, why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? I feel like you should be over here. It's just not. Later in life, maybe I would be more of a pesky board member. And there's a role for pesky board members and around us bringing on a new one and initiating a search for a new CEO at TRSP. That brought a lot of board members forward in a way where, like, a lot of Sunday afternoon phone calls, and it was like it demanded a lot of people, right? And so in those moments, I think you do need to be willing to step up, because there's nothing worse. This is going to a little bit contradict my hands-off policy. There's nothing worse than being invested in an organization and then later having this, like, well, I wish it had been this. I wish you had done that. I wish you hadn't done that. But you were never part of any of those conversations.
But you're a board member,
and now you
had the ability to be a part of, right?
And you chose not to, and then you do, like, there's a term I like where someone, it's called parachuting in. Someone parachutes into the middle of a conversation that's been going on for a long time, and you have a, what in the world? Why did anybody? It's like, buddy, there was a lot of conversations about this. You chose not to get involved in it. Now you're gonna have a fit about this now,
and you're hurting the whole process because now we got to slow down and do the whole thing.
That's not a super helpful board member, which is kind of why I don't. I don't. I don't know. I feel like I as a board member, I feel I know my role, and I'm aware there's probably board members that look and they probably feel that I don't maybe pull my weight. But later I will.
Well, but that's the other thing is, like, it's a volunteer board, and in these times of transition, when you're asking people to step up, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, boards are comprised of a select group of people who are diverse enough in their areas of expertise to where if everybody can contribute something from their area of expertise, it creates this whole package that's going to help guide the ship. That's what your group contribution is. Mm-hmm. And at the base level, that's your responsibility as a board member to be like, you know what, this is where I can chime in if it's appropriate. I've seen this before through this. My cards are kind of on the table.
Yep.
And that's going to help guide the conversation on policy or the next fiscal move or the logo change or all the things that may come across the table. For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. I guarantee you've listened to them because I use it, regularly. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's someone I'm close to who sits on a board of a nonprofit that's not in the conservation space, totally different area. And it almost strikes me, it's almost crass. This organization, when you're a board, they come to you and say, there's an expectation, there's an annual expectation of X dollars. You can give it or you can find it.
Yep.
But that's the expectation.
Yep.
And it just it lays it right out, dude. It's like, that's what this is.
Yep. Yep.
And that is a board. That is not a managerial. That is not a managerial board. It's not an expertise board. It's like you get a thing on your resume for X dollars.
Yep.
It feels so transactional.
But it's very common.
It's probably, no, I'm guessing it probably is common.
Yeah.
And that thankfully that's not how this organization is run. Like TRCP does not run. That's not my experience at TRCP.
Right. So I'd like to just talk, because this is such a huge topic, but TRCP on the partnership side of things, when they go in to an elected official's office or even going to the Fish and Wildlife Service or Department of the Interior, oftentimes they have gone to a ton of the conservation organizations. The Trout Unlimited, BHA's, Pheasants Forever's, Mule Deer Foundation, and said, hey, all of these conservation groups and all of these business interests, First Light, Meat Eater, Orvis, all of these business interests, and then can even be like endowments, foundations, are in agreement. Here's our letter that says, we're very concerned about the way your department's handling this, or what just recently happened in regards to the BLM rules that came out, and consequently a big stir up in Congress to knock back some of these rules. a letter was just presented that says, hey, we're in favor of these changes as we understand them to mean XYZ, which are very beneficial to the conservation of the habitat species, wildlands, waters, and access to them type of thing. So trying to condense the message and condense the power.
Yep.
And here's a nice little package for you to know that this is how we want you to follow through.
Yep.
Right.
We had a conversation recently with Becky Humphreys, who's the interim CEO of TRCP, and we were talking about like an aspect of what you're getting at, which is, so we're gonna have big election in November, and there's an issue of how are you gonna, whatever administration comes in, how do you lay the groundwork and approach an incoming administration or the continuation of the Biden administration or an incoming Trump administration? How does the conservation community come and lay out to the administration, here's some areas we'd like to cooperate on, here's some concerns we have. You're going to have certain appointments.
Yeah, and by the way, what would you like to accomplish, and how can we help with that?
Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to make certain appointments. These are some great names we'd love for you to look at for these appointments that would be people that we're going to interface with on conservation issues. And where's there room to cooperate? Where are we not going to be able to cooperate? Let's not blindside. We don't want to blindside you, right? Like, so heads up, this is going to be a big issue going forward. Even if you know you're not going to get cooperation from an administration, it's considered, a good way to partner and a good way to plan together to say, we're going to have friction around this. Don't want it to be a surprise, but this is going to be an area of friction for us. If you're going to continue down the path that you seem you're going to continue down, we want you to know that we're going to probably stand in opposition to you on this. Heads up. Or is there a way, so you're doing a lot of this at the federal level. You're doing a lot of that relationship building, not me, but the organization is, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of like the outdoor industry, right? Like the same names kind of pop up in different places throughout a career.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to have that communication.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's funny that way in which industry gets involved is, let's say you go look at over the years, Bass Pro Shops has been they've been a TRCP supporter. Imagine coming from that perspective. You're serving this enormous audience of outdoorsmen who are buying products to hunt and fish, to enjoy the outdoors. If you're looking out long range, like any executive leader should be, you're like, man, I need to look out for the interests of my clients, my customers, who they're participating with my business depends on them having access to these resources going forward. So long range planning for the business would be, how can I align with the conservation world to make hunting and fishing remain strong in America, and to make sure people have places to go boating and go hunting and go fishing, because I need to protect my business long term. And so they get, the really forward thinking ones get involved in the conservation thing, as not just because it's doing the right thing by the environment, it's doing the right thing by
their bottom line.
Yeah, the future of your business.
Yes.
Meaning if you sell fishing boats and you know that fishery stocks are declining, that don't look good for selling fishing boats, And so that's like a part of the nonprofit space, is like you're partnering with for-profit enterprises who are willing to spend money to promote a conservation message. So you see a ton of cooperation between like a nonprofit organization like TRCP and many others, and a for-profit enterprises, and they maintain a balance. There's a balance there where it's like they support the mission and do funding, but the conservation organization needs to have the autonomy to not become like an errand boy for the corporate interest, but it's got to be the corporate interest that has to say, I'm trusting you on these issues to pursue your things. And good leadership maintains that they take the money and stay on task and don't become, like I said, you don't become a corporate errand boy.
Yep.
But there's certain things you're working on.
Which can involve those exact same conversations that you just outlined, right?
Yep.
Like, well, what do you want to accomplish, Mr. Bass Pro or Cabela's or Meat Eater or whatever? Okay, here's where we might have some friction on that, but this is where we agree. And that's how you build out that trust or that cooperative agreement in the beginning, right?
Sure, yeah.
And when we talk about, we all like that set it and forget it thing. Like we see the TRCP sign-on letter, right? We're like, great, click through, it auto fills in your stuff and it goes out. BHA has one, Pheasants Forever has one. You might do a couple because you're getting bombarded for the issue du jour. And you should do those things. And it helps all of these organizations say, well, yeah, we sent out, this is how many people signed on through our sign-on letter when they go and they talk to that representative or senator. And that person can be like, okay, great. That means something. And then they're going to pivot and be like, okay, listen, AIDS, we've heard from the conservation groups. And then it's like, okay, well, actually, here's somebody from, and I used to do this on the First Light side of things. Here's somebody from a business in Idaho. And I'd come in and I'd say, hey, this is what we do. This is how many employees we have. This is where we're located. This is the customer that we sell to. Mm-hmm. This is their average income, kind of, give some demographic information and say, by the way, like, we don't have a business if you guys push this thing through and it, shuts down access to public lands or divest public lands, for instance. And then hopefully you have a bunch of businesses that are empowered to do the same thing. And then they go, okay, hey, AIDS, we've heard enough from the business people. And then hopefully there's, okay, well, gosh, there's like a soccer mom of 4 kids here and she just wants to talk to you. And that lady has the same messaging, right?
Yep.
She's like, this is where we live. This is how much we make. This is what we do on the weekends.
Yeah.
It means a lot to us.
That business thing you see is a thing you see played a lot, and like our company has signed on to some of these. I know TRCP has put some of these together where that speaks to certain people in the political spectrum. Meaning, when you do those robo letters, let's be honest, no one's reading those letters. They're putting them in 2 piles. Yay, nay, right? They're putting them in 2 piles. Now, the business thing I feel is a little bit different. Where if there's an issue, and you can come and be like, here's 250 businesses that are saying this conservation issue is going to impact our bottom line and impact our ability to create jobs and keep jobs. And
which is X amount of jobs.
Yeah. And it's X amount of revenue. That speaks a lot. Like if there's an invasive species that's going to destroy, a fishery, and then all those businesses that contribute to that fishery say like, hey man, I don't care what you got to do. Take care of this problem because you're hurting our bottom line here or potentially going to destroy my business. And that's going to be a hard conversation for us to have. It just speaks to a different political mentality.
Yeah. Because we all like to put things in buckets, right? And be like, okay, well, I got the boat people. And it's like, oh, well, turns out there's also the bird watching people, and it's all tied into the same thing. And then pretty soon the ideal scenario is like every pivot that person makes, they get the same story from what at least appears to be a very different slice of that political pie.
Yep. And picture those situations where you're like, I got the bird watchers on my case about this. I got the hunters on my case about this. I got the damn marinas on my case files.
Yeah, exactly. The people who love wolves, the people who hate wolves, and then all of a sudden they're like, turns out we're crazy.
Yep.
Like it turns out it wasn't a fully formed idea, or however it gets spit out. At
Exactly.
The end of the day.
Like,
So,
I got everybody pissed off at me now. We're going to walk away from this idea. And that we really saw, like, I think the great example we saw of that, and it was is around 2015, 2016, the movement around divestiture of public lands, which comes up now and then. There was a version of it in the 80s. There was a version of it in the 2010s, a big push. And it was one of those areas where you saw almost universal disapproval from conservation organizations, at a grassroots level disapproval of that plan, and then a real pushback from the outdoor industry around that plan. And that push, I mean, it lived on in some ways, but that push kind of like rose and died.
Yep.
Right? Because there was a great coalescing of forces and a great coalescing of conservation boards that really just came out and showed how unpopular that idea was. And we don't see that a ton. That we saw it with Pebble Mine.
Meaning like not that many, the broad diverse coalition that came together on that issue doesn't happen for every issue.
No, you don't see it come up. In my recollection, I can think of Pebble Mine being like industry, environmental groups, hunter angler groups, right? And then around divestiture of public land, I feel like there was like industry, environmental groups, hunter angler groups, right? Really made it very clear. Their displeasure with that plan became very clear.
Yeah, which is awesome to have those moments of being like, oh, okay, we're all in this thing together. Yeah, right.
And in other times you see, something different play out. And I have been witness to. I don't want to get into detail about this, but talking about being on a board of a nonprofit, I'm not saying anything I shouldn't say, because of course this is true. There are areas where you hit areas of internal conflict. There are areas, like I've been privy to conversations. I don't want to get into specifics on it, just out of respect for the organization, but there are these kind of like general areas of friction among board members, which should be expected. It should be healthy, but like policy driven things where this group of 24 board members have varying opinions about certain issues. And that I see can cause a slowness of movement.
But you could argue too, like that's the way a board should be constructed.
Yeah, how would you not want it that way?
Right.
Because it's not a rubber. I guess I'm pointing out it's not a rubber stamp committee.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things like like a president of an organization, like they have to make a hire. Of course, they want some input, but at that point, the person needs to be able to make the damn hire.
Yep.
They're not gonna spend 6 months arguing about it. Like at some point, you're like, okay, you got what you need. Make your decision. We're gonna agree with your decision and move on. Or spending. Or like they're going to switch from they're going to switch from this lease to that lease. It's like, let your opinions be known and let the person do their job. But there's some issues there are some issues that become like, there's things that wind up being very long-term discussions about how to approach an issue. And that is carried on.
Right. We're going to make a national level policy on, we just talked about like emerging technologies, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, okay, if we want to make that policy on a BHA national level, that may not sit very well with our corporate partners who make that particular technology.
Yeah.
Are we taking that into consideration, and how do we feel about that? Right?
Yeah, that would be, just speaking generally of conservation organizations, that might wind up being like a pretty interesting litmus test. If you're at a board level of the conservation group, is when you do wind up in a situation where you need to take a policy position that's going to sit at odds with a major contributor.
Yep.
And listen, man, I'm not discrediting either of these perspectives because they're real. They're
Absolutely.
real.
Yep.
Do you say, there's plenty of other stuff we can do. Why have the friction? Why upset a corporate sponsor? We have our second and third most important issue. Let's just pursue those and not upset this balance we have of funding. Or you can say, we need to do what's right by our mission, what's right by, the people, all the thousands of individual donors we have, and we're going to do this thing that's going to make a corporate sponsor uncomfortable. That's tough, man. And like I said, I'm not saying that, it's simplistic to say you should always go. You should always go one direction or the other.
That one direction of what's right could also be unattainable.
Mm-hmm.
And the others, anyways, and the B and C's are like going to create a greater good for the long run in and of themselves. So yeah, it's not the classic black and white, right? So, what's your elevator speech for TRCP? Like if you bump into somebody at the airport and you're on your way to the board meeting and they're like, "Oh, why would I throw a couple of bucks towards TRCP?"
Advocating on behalf of hunters and anglers in D.C. with federal politicians and federal policymakers.
Boots on the ground in D.C.
Yeah, that we're here. That policymakers, lawmakers, legislators are hearing the perspective of hunters and anglers from a measured, balanced, intelligent organization that is not looking to play gotcha, not looking to embarrass you, right? Not looking to make a big press release, trying to shame you, but like, how can we work together? Here's things that are important to us. Which of these things in front of you can we both win on and be helpful partners? And
I like it.
There's a lot of things like that is not to discredit people out rolling up old fence and doing grasslands work and doing wetlands work and putting in boat launches, right? All of that's important. All that's important.
And you're not saying you can't contribute there too, right?
No, it's just that like this organization is doing an essential thing, which is guiding federal policy, influencing federal policy, and being, boots on the ground in DC.
And is there a thing at the DC level right now that you feel strongly about or people should be aware of?
Yeah, a lot of involvement. Just recently, some things that there's been a ton of involvement on is like the perennial farm bill. So getting conservation money and also federal access dollars. So federal dollars to increase access for hunters and anglers. Getting appropriate thing for getting CRP or Conservation Reserve Program stuff in place. Helping private landowners who want to do the right thing by conservation on their private lands. Helping them have funding and expertise to do private lands wildlife conservation. And again, most of the country is private property. We spent a lot of time in the West talking about public lands. But meanwhile, east of the Mississippi, let's be honest, conservation happens on private ground. Okay, so having dollars
percentage-wise,
yeah. Having that expertise there. Another thing another big thing was infrastructure. Another big thing is climate spending. So. And I don't give a shit how you feel about climate spending. Money is getting spent on alternatives. Okay. They're doing solar. They're doing wind. And there's a lot of federal money going to subsidize those industries. Are those industries in this explosion of spending around renewables, are those renewable dollars going to be used in a way that is less harmful to wildlife? As we develop resources and develop landscapes for alternatives, how can we guide this in a way that's beneficial or less destructive on wildlife habitat? That's a big thing happening at the federal level right now.
And last thing, All of which, I should say, everything that Steve just said, 100%. Like, you have got to be the classic saying of, like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Mm-hmm.
That every single one of those points that Steve, or issues that Steve just brought up, is something we all need to be paying attention to and weigh in on. But the last thing, if somebody were to approach you and say, hey, do you want to be on the board for this nonprofit? What would be your 2 cents? Like, would you say?
I would be, you're talking from an advice standpoint?
Yeah.
Man, I would do this. I would get really granular about expectations and a realistic look at what you can do and what exactly is being asked of me. How will I succeed? And then a self-examination of, am I going to be able to deliver that, and go into it where you understand what's being asked of you and you know that you have the capacity to deliver on it, because you don't want to become dead weight on an organization. You're filling up a seat and you're not bringing it. So, like, man, would love to help. What are you thinking here? How can I be most beneficial? And then ask yourself, can I deliver on that promise? And also, you should probably familiarize yourself with the policy stances, right? And know what you're getting into.
Where's the organization at? What's the health of the organization?
Yeah. And then do you feel that you can be generally supportive of the organization, or do you feel that the organization would need to change fundamentally in order to make you comfortable? And then, are you really in the position to change an organization fundamentally? Or are you able to come on board and be comfortable supporting the organization and not become on board and be like, yeah, but all the time?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's helpful, but like coming in the door, it's probably a good idea to be comfortable with the organization.
Yeah. I mean, because you're expected, if you're going to be at that level, to be an overall supporter of the organization and be able to, like, wear that on your sleeve, right? Yeah. Because kind of recruitment for what the organization does, and kind of like that grassroots marketing is a very base level ask, so much so that it's very much inferred, right? So, Steve, you got to go, man.
Yep,
I got to go. Thank you so much. Gang, Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and keep writing in and asking what you want to know and who we need to talk to. ASKCAL, that's askcal@themeateater.com. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Hey, we're going to take a little break here and talk about interstate batteries. Now, if you're like me, enjoying the great outdoors, you need gear that is as reliable as it gets. That's why I power my adventures with interstate batteries. I use interstate batteries in my boats. I use interstate batteries in my camper. Great for your truck, too. From Alaska to Montana, they're outrageously dependable. Battery is essential. With over 150,000 dealer locations, finding one is easy. For all your vehicles, land or sea, choose Interstate. Head to interstatebatteries.com and find your power today.
Hey, I just sat down with the owners and operators of Maui Nui Venison. They're on a mission to balance axis deer populations on Maui while giving back to the community and run a totally sustainable operation. For folks like me who want to get your own meat but aren't always successful, you can become a snack subscriber, get some axis deer sticks sent right to your door. Visit MauiNuiVenison.com. That's MAUINUI venison.com, and use promo code CAL for 20% off your first order.